Anxiety. It's one of the most common and most crippling emotions we experience. And today on the Modern Motherhood podcast from All Mom Does, I'm Julie Lyles-Carr, and my guest today has wrestled deep anxiety and fearfulness and panic attacks, all while being involved in ministry. And she's here today to talk about what she's learned in managing and understanding her own anxious nature and how you can discover ways to alleviate it in your own life or in the life of someone you love. Today, we welcome Rebekah Lyons. Just give us, I know most of my listeners are going to know who you are and are going to be fangirling along with me, but tell us who you are, where you live, the 4 kids, the things.
Oh, absolutely. Well, first of all, it's a joy to be here, so thanks for having me. So I guess I'll start with my roles. I've been married to my husband now for 22 years, and we have 4 children, 18, 16, 14, and now a 6-year-old who's been with us for about 9 months. She came from China home with us back in December. My oldest, Cade, has Down syndrome, and my baby, Joy, who's 6, has Down syndrome. So they're kind of our bookends. And then we have Pierce, who's 16, and Kennedy, who's 14. We live in Nashville. My husband and I co-run a nonprofit called Q Ideas, and it's all about how Christians are on the front lines of culture and arts and media and government, policy, education, and just what does faithfulness look like when culture sometimes seems like it's going off the rails, and how do we live out lives of conviction and intention, but also just being known for what we're for and not against.
I love that. And you have been really transparent about some of the challenges that you've had with things like depression and anxiety and all of that. When did you start to feel comfortable about really discussing what that experience is like living in the world with a filter, particularly in a Christian construct where we're supposed to be the ones who are happy and have so much joy?
Right.
Where did you start feeling like you could begin discussing that? What was a safe place for you to begin talking about that within your own life?
Well, I didn't experience anxiety in a way that I had language for it until 2010. We moved our family to Manhattan, actually from the suburbs of Atlanta, so that would be almost a decade ago. And within 4 months, I had my first panic attack. I didn't even know what was happening. Had to go to the doctor several times to figure out, like, oh, your body and your heart is racing. And for me, it really stemmed from a feeling of being trapped, almost like a claustrophobic onset, whether it started on an airplane, but then it would also be an elevator, a subway, or a crowd, or anything crowded in New York, which is not hard.
Is everywhere.
Right? With 8 million people and 11 miles. So I found that started pretty much on a daily basis for the first year, almost a year and a half I was there. And then I do remember specifically just crying out to God a lot in that season out of desperation. I had become a Christian when I was 5. I decided to follow Jesus. But at that age, you're not really sure what you are being saved from,
Right.
But 30 years later, you have a good idea.
A better idea.
When you realize you can't function the way you used to. I just started to live small. And I do remember crying out to God one night in the middle of the night, just saying, rescue me. And in that moment, the peace of Christ flooded me. And it was the first time I came out of a panic attack without having to escape or remove the setting. And so what began that day was a healing journey, and I didn't have another one for almost 7 years, actually. And I started writing and teaching around this. And you asked where I first wrote. Well, I wrote about a couple months after that kind of moment where everything shifted in September of 2011. I wrote an article for our nonprofit called Q, and the title was Why Are Women Fading? And it was this idea that we in our 20s, we march off to college and we're ready to charge hell with a water pistol. We feel all the ambition and dreams and application of what that means, but 2 decades later, we've lost a sense of who we are. We take on the roles of duty and responsibility, and we lose sight of what our heart is even being tugged toward. That's not to say that it isn't tugged towards home or tugged towards children, but sometimes our identity falls solely in those roles and responsibilities, and we lose sight of who we were as young children or the things that made us sing or come alive. And so that's where I began to talk about it. And people would say, why do you feel uncomfortable talking about this in the church? And I just didn't know enough not to, right? I wasn't enough in that space. My husband and I ran this, but I wasn't a blogger or a writer, an author. I didn't even have aspirations of doing it. I just had a story. And I've always been a chronic oversharer. And so God gave me a story I couldn't shut up about. And so that's how it really came. And I was like, oh, am I supposed to be embarrassed? I didn't realize that. It was a little too late at that point. The week my first book came out was a really sad week. It was actually the week that Matthew Warren died. Mm-hmm. And I was immediately asked to write an article for CNN on let's stop keeping mental health a secret.
Right.
And so that just threw me out there as like, okay, now you are going to talk about it.
Right.
And you're talking about it in a very public way. And I was able to talk about it even in the context of the church, like how it's not something that we shame. It's not something that we hide or put under the rug. We have to start honoring that people are really struggling and come around them and know how to love them and know what to do, because a lot of people just don't know what to do with it. And so that was how it began for me.
And so you really have become this voice that is willing to speak into these spaces. Do you find in some of the conversations you're having that we still are experiencing within faith communities people who have a hard time either discussing the things that they're going through internally, or when someone does share, those people who really have struggled to say, okay, that's okay. Like, let's come to the circle and talk about that. What do you think are we weighted more one side to the other, do you think? People who still have a hard time receiving information that someone's struggling, or someone still struggling to say, I'm having a hard time?
I don't think there's as much of a struggle to express it, because now anxiety has become a buzzword.
Right.
You know, it's almost overused because people don't really understand fully what it means. Anxiety is not stress. Those are two different things. Anxiety is a buildup of stress and a prolonged season to where, and then you're eventually overwhelmed. But anxiety, in my opinion, and I'm not a doctor, is when your body starts showing physical signs of distress.
Okay.
And so here's a great example. The American Institute of Stress says that currently in our culture, 77% of all adults are showing physical symptoms of stress, which really is an onset to anxiety. So if you're having shallow breathing or chest pains, or you feel your thoughts are racing and you can't actually, you have sleepless nights, that's physical signs of stress. So that technically can be described as this anxious mind. And then that can escalate into something which is more extreme, like what I would picture for me in my context was like, then that becomes panic. And that's when your body really acts out. There's no rational thing happening. And it's almost as if on an airplane when I'm trapped and feeling like if I don't get out, I will die. Your body reacts as if you're being held at gunpoint, but you're really not.
Right.
So it's like your heart is almost having a heart attack. That's why people will find themselves at the ER going, I'm having a heart attack. And they're like, no, your heart's fine. Your body's just actually shutting down, because a doctor told me it can no longer respond to the internal stress you're carrying. It can't hold it in any longer.
Right. And so it's just hit such a fevered pitch that's why the body then responds the way that it does. I like how you create that distinction for us between anxiety and stress, because I do think we use those terms interchangeably. And yet we're not going to have completely stress-free lives.
Right.
There are going to be times, hey, even trying to get kids back to school, how much stress is that about?
Yeah.
But it's going to calm down. Everybody's going to get in a new routine, and it's going to happen. But anxiety, I just really like that distinction, because I think we really do have to be aware of the things where we're starting to shift over into something that is not going to be good for us long term. It's not good for our souls. It's not good for us physically. And the impact on our families.
Sure.
What is the impact on a family when anxiety begins to take hold of one family member and it just kind of keeps escalating?
Well, we have different ways of even handling stress. Like my husband can internalize it, so it's actually still doing damage to its body. It's just less obvious.
Right.
Whereas for me, it's like, I'll do this. I just got to get a deep breath. I can't get a deep breath. And then it can actually be more intense. Like, I got to get out of here, right? I got to run. It's that fight or flight kicks in. That's when it's more distress. So the crazy thing, though, is that continuum can happen within a matter of 3 minutes.
Right.
Like, you could be like, we're handling, and then, oh, no, we're not.
No, it's not going yet. Yeah.
And so I do think the fallout, like you asked, on our families or our relationships or friendships is, for me, because I do outwardly handle stress a little bit more, my kids see that, unfortunately. I wish that I could kind of keep it in and clench my jaw as well as my husband does. But I also know that that's not healthy either.
Right.
So what we do find, though, in general, if we are overreacting to any given situation, it's stress. We're being pushed on both sides or all sides, and then just that stress that we're kind of internally carrying eventually comes out.
Right.
And New York was that for me. It was a pressure cooker. We had left family and friendships and sold like everything we owned, and we moved to this tiny apartment in the Upper East Side, and it was such a life shift. It was like we might as well have moved to Africa, because New York City and the suburbs of Atlanta could not be more different.
Right.
And so I should have probably counted the cost a little bit more in advance. Like, you've never done anything like this. You've lived in Atlanta since you had babies and since you were married 13 years ago. And I just didn't handle it well. But I do think so. It can be a vocational move or a major transition. It could be loss of a loved one. I mean, it could be grief, trauma that's unresolved. Whatever those things are, it just manifests in certain circumstances. Now, certainly I've talked to plenty of people who are like, no, I've actually been anxious my whole life. Since I was a kid, I would have like night terrors or bad dreams or whatever.
It's always just been a thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a different situation. And I again, always counsel people, hey, get with a good counselor, psychologist, psychiatrist if necessary, because every situation is going to be different. And I certainly can't speak on behalf of that. But in general, you need to know, is my soul well?
Right.
We need to be checking in on ourselves with God, before God, quietly, in solitude, going like, are we good? Am I good? Are these relationships good? Because anything that's good should be for our flourishing and for the people around us. Right. And so maybe we're doing awesome internally, but our people are dying, right? Because we are actually too maxed out. We have no time for them. That's actually still not good. Right. So it's really about what's for my health and the health of the people God's entrusted to me.
Do you think, I find it so interesting that we identify more as a culture that is experiencing so much stress and anxiety, when in reality, our lifespans are longer, our health is better, our provisions are better, we have food year-round, generally in this country. I mean, all it takes for me is just a quick read-through of what life was like during Elizabethan England for the peasants, or to, just stroll back through the Laura Ingalls Wilder books and go, why do we identify so strongly with being so stressed when I look at some of the situations in decades gone past? And I think, wow, that seems a whole lot more stressful.
Right. Exactly.
Did they just not have verbiage and language for it? Or are we just a little more precious and sensitive? Like, what do you think is going on?
Probably all of the above. But I do think more is not more. And so we have compounded a problem by just thinking, because all these things have been at our fingertips, therefore everything should always, it's such a consumption perspective, right? And I think actually why people a century behind us were more healthy is some of the things I talk about in the book. They worked with their hands. Right. They actually took walks. They took naps. They took tech detox because they didn't have any technology. They did a permanent tech detox. And we can't minimize the role that technology has played in our humanity. Like just the incarnate, like a hug, eye contact, sitting across the table like we are. Like there are things that are going to land in a physical context that will never ever happen on a screen. And so part of the stress and anxiety is also because people are feeling such loneliness and isolation, which has been spurred on by, again, technology. People didn't face that. So they might have been peasants, but they were with their people. They were with family. They worked hard. They slept well because they worked hard with their hands. And physical exertion is my restore rhythm. I have 4 rhythms in the book. Yes. To input or rest and restore, to output or connect and create. Even in the day of Jesus, right, he says, come follow me. Well, I've studied this, and some scholars think he walked 3,300 miles in the span of his ministry. Wow. Based on all the places and
everywhere he was going to. Right.
I was like, that's what we call, I read a chapter, taking a walk, like what walk does for our bodies, what it does for our brains, for our serotonin levels, and for our sleep. Right. And even the diet of that day, was going to be from the ground. Right. We weren't, picking up a bag of Lay's from a vending machine. So
guilty as charged.
Right. So same. So while we have more advances, we equally have more detriments. And I think this book to me is a callback. It is a hearkening back to a historic framework of like, let's just strip some of the things away that have distracted us, that made us not present, made us not grateful, because we've just consumed too much. And when you consume too much, nothing is a blessing
lose your gratitude
anymore.
Right. Yeah. Right. It's an expectation. Back in just a moment with Rebekah. Do you ever feel like you're living Groundhog Day? Remember that movie with Bill Murray? He plays a guy who keeps repeating the same day over and over, getting up, going through all the same motions. Motherhood can feel like that. The routine, the chores, the little things that need to be done but have to be done all over again the next day. Does it make you wonder if all that day after day means anything? If it's important? Well, here's some good news. Yes, it does. Little things are big things. And you'll get to explore exactly that in my newest Bible study from Abington Women called Footnotes. Discover the impact of the lives of 4 Bible characters you may have never noticed before and how their day after day lives have led to big impact in our own. You can find Footnotes wherever you like to buy your books and at abingtonwomen.com/footnotes. In your new book, Rhythms of Renewal, Trading Stress and Anxiety for a Life of Peace and Purpose, here's an interesting question for you. So in the books that I've put out, I love it. I love to write. It is my heartbeat. There is some stress that comes with trying to get things on that page and get all the deadlines and make sure the publisher's got this and on and on and on. So how did you navigate those ironic waters of trying to get all this out about stress and anxiety and not yet get yourself back to that place?
Oh, exactly. It is the test of all tests. It helped because I took a tech detox last year and I hadn't ever in my professional
How long was
life.
that for?
3 months. I went off all social media because my dad had passed in April and I could see me starting to spiral into depression in May. And I was like, I don't really want to hemorrhage publicly. And I was like, it's been about 6 to 7 years I've been going pretty strong.
Right.
And God's not casual about Sabbath.
Right.
And if he rested the land, he probably wants to rest our bodies too. And not that I can take a whole year off, but when we said yes to adopting Joy shortly after that, I was deliberately benching myself professionally.
Right.
Knowing that there was a book coming out after her being home for 9 months. But I just said no to so much this spring. And at moments, I was so released with my work that I was just like, I can be done. I feel full. I'm grateful. It's not that I don't love the teaching or love the writing, but when she came in front of us, her profile and an option to adopt her, I kept saying, does this mean I quit working or teaching or traveling or writing? And all I heard back in response was, do you trust me? Mm-hmm. And to me, it was just God's request to go, are you willing to push it all the chips back into the center of the table? Like you're willing to walk because you really, this life is about communion with him ultimately. Right. And anything that flows from that is a creative expression. But if that creative expression of writing or teaching is robbing the intimacy, then those things need to pause.
Right.
They really do. And I found for myself that by saying yes to Joy, I was intentionally almost punching my ambition in the face.
Yeah.
Because I knew that that wasn't going to pair well. And while I wanted to honor the commitment of this book, I knew I would have to confront even what might even become idolatry for me is just like the work production that comes around a launch, as you know.
Right.
And so now I joked with my friends the other day. I was like, this is the only book, it's my third, that I've come into it with zero expectations and zero amounts of energy, which isn't something you want to tell your publisher.
I'm sure your editor loves hearing that.
I know. I was like, don't tell anyone. But no, God is merciful. I waited to pre-launch till this week because Joy started kindergarten after 9 months together full time for the most part. And I feel like God honored that, and he will continue to. And yes, there will be temptation. The travel's picking back up. But having this grounding intentionally for the better part of this year has just shown me that who is at the helm.
Right.
It's not me, and it's not this project. And if I have to consciously, verbally say that out loud, like, God, you are king. I exalt you. I want to keep I always wake with the scripture on my lips. I will keep her in perfect peace whose eyes are fixed on me because she trusts in me. So if I fix my eyes on all the to-dos, which really can stress me out, as we know, I'm not immune to it. I haven't arrived.
Right.
Yeah, I'm putting it right in front of me. But I'm going to intentionally stop looking at those things and I'm going to rest back in who you are, knowing that the work is already finished. The finished work of whatever this looks like, whatever the outcome, whatever the outcome is, it's already done.
Right. I wrote to myself in 2018, I say to myself, it felt very, very God-led. But as I was looking through my 2018 goals and what I wanted to do and the workload and the ministry and all that kind of stuff, I wrote to myself and then I had to keep writing it to myself, Rebekah. God is not the job. I don't know how we get to that place, but sometimes when we're trying to serve, when we're doing those things of being in church and wanting to do this and wanting to do that and being asked to be on this committee and the other, we can lose sight of it so quickly. And I think it's so powerful that you were willing to say, okay, we're parking the ambition. I think that's incredible. And I'm going to be really curious. I think a lot of times we love those stories where we're like, well, I just gave it all back to God and then he just sent it back tenfold, Mm-hmm. But if we're only giving it up from that perspective, thinking, well, maybe there'll be some bigger investment on the, on the return.
No, God knew. I was like, because I do think when My first book, I was very naively optimistic. I had never written before, and somehow I thought it was just going to do amazing. So I kind of came in with just the wrong expectations, which is wrong, but that was great. I learned the hard way that way. And the second one, the book, I worked really, really hard, and I am proud of it, and it's a message that changed my life, and I'll preach it as long as I have breath. But this time around, I was like, I don't want to come in with expectations or like just slaving over work.
Right.
This one's just going to be like, it's you, or it's your way or the highway.
Well, I love that you're launching this book on anxiety, on learning how to live in a place of rhythm that makes sense. I love that you're legitimately launching it from that place, because I think sometimes it can be real tempting to Sabbath or this, but the reality is we're not really coming from that place.
Hard.
Yeah.
It's hard.
I think that willingness to have such an integrity on it is fantastic. So what are you doing with your kids? I know our listeners are going to say, okay, I'm dealing with my own stress and anxiety, but I know for myself, of my 8, I have 2 who came pre-wired to be a lot more stressed. And I can see it in the general population of 8 kids, because they're all in the same house. We're all, well, not anymore. They're starting to lunch. But
there you go.
But when you can see within that population, and that they're all basically leading the same type of lifestyle in the same context, in the same culture, and you've got 2 who really are just up here when it comes to just the stress out thing.
Yeah.
So what are you doing with your 4 to help them navigate that? And knowing that some of them might have a proclivity to it, since you do, and knowing that some of them are going to see it modeled. How are you handling that?
Well, that's you. I have only 4. You have double that. So I feel like I've already got, my strategy is probably different than yours, because my husband and I can divide and conquer a little bit better, in that 2 of the kids are wired more like him, 2 are wired more like me, which is wonderful, because we have to tag team. One thing we're learning, we have 3 kids in high school, and then we have 1 kindergarten.
Oh, well, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, if they were all in high school, I think we'd have a different thing, but we've just invited this glorious interruption in with all of everything that requires. And so I'm back to reading books at bedtime every night. But the sweet thing about doing that with Joy is that Cade, my 18-year-old with Down syndrome, he sees how much fun we're having, and he doesn't want to miss it. So now he comes downstairs, and the 3 of us cuddle in Joy's room. It used to be the guest room. Now it's like Joy's toddler bed and a guest bed. So now Cade wants to be in there, and we'll just do book time. And sometimes the teens will come in too, because we're just having a big, just fun moment. But then the other thing that Gabe and I have both talked about that we want to be intentional with is Pierce and Kennedy. They've carried so much responsibility with their siblings their whole lives. And so we don't, A, ever want to overlook that or take it for granted. And B, we want to make sure we're getting time with them without the other 2 that's nurturing their hearts. So Gabe just told me the other day, he's like, I want to tuck Kennedy in every night. And she's a freshman. She's like, Dad, it's okay. Like, you don't need to do that. And he's like, but I kind of want to. And I think we're both just feeling, we don't have a lot of time left. Pierce is a junior and Kennedy's a freshman. And so we're not saying we'll be able to carry through on all these things, but we certainly are realizing that we might have Cade and Joy in our home for a long time. We don't know. We don't know what the future holds for them. But we don't with Pierce and Kennedy. And because they're more aware of culturally what's up against them, they're going to feel the more weight of anxiety, because they're dealing with real stressors. Cade and Joy almost have a free pass to play. Like they have permission to play every day, and they're like, what are y'all stressed out about?
Yeah.
Let's just give me some ketchup with my French fries, So Pierce and Kennedy, they just have a lot on them, and I think it's good for Gabe and I to get time with them one-on-one, or the 4 of us. Just talk about stuff that doesn't distract when sometimes all of us are together.
Right. In our group of 8, we have 2 who are differently abled, and it is something that I've become even more aware of through all these years. But there is a certain level of stress that it does place on the other kids, and not because it's not happy and an honor and it's been such a powerful thing. It's simply that they feel a protectiveness. They feel a sense of responsibility that is bigger constantly. And I think one of my children definitely has carried more of the stress of that. And she's the one who runs our nonprofit for those who are differently abled for dance. And so I think that she carries more of that now in a way that is unique. And I do think we have to look at the dynamics within the family, because you may not have a child who's differently able, but you may have a child who's really struggling with something else. Maybe you've just discovered that they've gotten into something at school that they never should have been in. That impacts the family. That impacts the stress levels within the family. Or things like a move, things like job changes, all of those things. Even if you're the person who is struggling with the anxiety and you have a kid you consider to be really laid back, to make sure you're watching those things, because sometimes those laid back kids can be your secret ninjas who actually are really struggling, and you don't know because they seem to act so laid back.
It's so true. And I think just as mothers, I'm so grateful that we have a pulse on just discerning, what's not being said or reading behind the eyes, and be like, no, really, let's get out, let's get together, let's get some time away, let's go grab a coffee, or let's get nails done, or whatever, whoever, because I do think sometimes they won't project their pain because there's just a lot going on. But but in the one-on-one and later at night, when there's that warmth and coziness of home, they're more likely to open up. And so that's why we want to honor that and cherish that time.
Absolutely. And I think, too, with the kids that are in your home who are your kids you would say are responsible, they're the ones that I like to watch closely, too, because sometimes I think they feel, even though we've said all along, we want you to be able to share, we want you to be able to feel safe. But I think kids do sometimes feel like they need to protect us sometimes. They're trying to buffer us. And so I think those rhythms of saying we really can talk, we really can be open are so powerful. Now, you like to start your morning as someone who self-identifies as a potential stress bomb. You have something that you like to do in the morning to try to begin the day in a way that starts getting those things to calm, to get yourself in a great state from the soul perspective, but also from a biology perspective.
Sure.
So what do you do in those first 15 minutes?
Sure. Well, in the morning routine for me, I write a chapter on this just about how I posture myself. First, I try to get up before the kids, which isn't hard these days. Unfortunately, I'm like up early. But it's a good thing because I like a quiet house. I really do feel like that solitude is not loneliness. We're very much with God, and He meets us in that place. And so I personally take a posture of kneeling because it automates.
It triggers something for you, right?
It's like when you're kneeling, you're already released, and you almost can exhale even easier. And I'll just palms up, say, I worship, I exalt thee, or just whatever it is. Christ, have mercy. Whatever the phrase is initially, just to kind of, I cast all my cares upon you right now. And that just begins this permission to receive whatever He has for me that day. First thing, just through communion and just listening and talking, and not over talking, not over praying, but more just saying, whatever you have for me today, I don't want to miss it. I don't want to oversee it. Show me what you have for our family, and whatever surprise, encounters we might have today, or the people we might interact with. But for me, too, I'm just like, thank you for being the Prince of Peace, for being my peace, and I come under your covering of peace. It's almost just like I constantly say that a lot because I need to be reminded that when Jesus says, the peace I give, the world cannot give, that's a special situation. It's a different
thing.
He's like, if I give you some, and then I'm like, okay, I'm taking you up on that. And then there's gratitude, and then there's some journaling because I like reflection, and it's also an ongoing dialogue with God, and then scripture. So it's those four things, and each day it varies in the order, but it kind of goes in that cadence, and I try to do that with a candle and coffee if I'm being healthy in that season, I'm just doing water and lemon and a smoothie. But I don't usually get the blender going that early, let's be honest. So, but yeah, just finding that thing that centers you and grounds you and reminds you what is true. Planting truth in your heart before you the lies want to start attacking is huge. I'll make a palette sometimes in my closet if it's cold and I don't want to go to the living room, and it's just wherever it is. Even if you have a room that you can even set journal or Bible out, and it can't just make a space and make an intentional time where you're just this is reserved for just God and I to kind of regroup, this new mercy before I get going getting everyone out the door.
Right. I do think we set ourselves up sometimes for a fail when we are trying to do too many things first thing in the morning, and we're jacking ourselves up with coffee, and then we don't understand why by noon we've already lost our temper 3 times and we are just frazzled. But we kind of set ourselves up a little bit for it.
We're like, why am I so anxious? Oh, I had 3 refills of double shot mocha. You're like, well, that'll do it. That'll do it.
Last year I went on decaf, and as somebody who has been such a coffee junkie, I had people texting me saying, you mentioned you were drinking decaf in your Instagram story. Is this like a secret message? Do you need help? Do we pay the ransom or something? But I did find, even those simple things, caffeine was really increasing my stress levels, my anxiety responses.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I think this idea of really being intentional about setting a tone early in the morning where you're not hijacking your own biology in terms of your soul care.
Right.
So
well, and the restore rhythm is all about your body.
Right.
And I write 7 chapters about what you put in your body and when and why and how you move your body. And God created you for all these things for your sustained health. And so I, learned late in the game that starting your morning with water before coffee and room temperature is best, because your body doesn't have to work so hard to actually warm it once it's inside your body, because your body doesn't process ice cold water.
Right.
And apparently all the Europeans know this.
Yes. We're just a little slow.
But in the South, I really like everything iced.
Yeah, exactly.
But even with some fresh lemon is a detox. It's like a toxin remover. So because toxins build up over the night because your liver's been working. They work their hardest at night, which is why if your liver's stressed, you'll wake up at around 2 or 3 a.m. because it's working hard to detoxify your body. But then in the morning, if you have like room temperature water with fresh squeezed lemon, not like fake lemon, but a real lemon cut and squeezed, that actually flushes all the toxins that your body worked hard to get rid of all night. Right. And so you get all that out before you start to throw caffeine on top of that. Yeah. And it's just like little decisions like that. I do take, vitamins and supplements where I know I'm in a season of fatigue. I'm low in iron, or I'm low in vitamin C, or whatever it is, because I just think we need to be on top of that regularly with the pace we run sometimes.
Right. And, I just think about the verse where we're told that, our bodies are temples. They were given to us for a reason. And I think sometimes we try to separate soul care and physical care, but that's not how we were created for this side of eternity.
That's absolutely
and so I love that you unpack that and spend quite a bit of time in your new book, Rhythms of Renewal. Rebekah Lyons, thank you so much for being with us. This is going to be such a blessing, both to me and to the listeners. I'm just so thankful that you have taken the time to really unpack and think through how we can cooperate with the peace of God and really invite it into our lives. So thanks so much.
Thanks for having me. It was my pleasure.
Check out our show notes, and they are put together every week by our content coordinator, Rebekah. Different Rebekah than Rebekah Lyons. She's our Rebekah. She puts together all the places you can connect with Rebekah Lyons and all kinds of helpful links and notes from the episode. Please connect with me over on Instagram. I love to hear from you, what episodes really resonated with you and what you'd like to hear on upcoming episodes. And hey, I would love it and appreciate it so much if you'd subscribe to the podcast and leave a 5-star rating and review. It helps get the word out about the podcast. It helps it show up in the shadowy algorithm world on iTunes and Stitcher and all the places where you listen in for your podcasts. So thanks so much for your help. Our content coordinator is Rebekah. Our producer is Donna, and they are the dynamic duo who gets the episodes out to you each and every week. Check out allmomdoes.com and on the socials. It's a community of women in the same season of life as you. You're going to find friendships and information and inspiration that truly are life-giving at All Mom Does. I'll see you next time on the Modern Motherhood Podcast.